Well, good afternoon and welcome back to everyone for our final session of the day. I hope you all had an enjoyable lunch, and welcome also to our web streamers. This final session we talked about it just before lunch. The title is Synergies and Complementarities between EIT Community and other EU policy and funding instruments. And I have the great pleasure to have with me on stage 6 individuals from across Commission services who will go into some detail this afternoon in talking about exactly what do we mean by this synergies and complementarities. Synergies is a word we hear about a lot in EU speak. And as someone mentioned before lunch, I think it was Beate, a very important point. Synergies is not just about funding synergies, it's about policy synergies. It's about how we align things together from a policy perspective and indeed a strategic angle. And for that, I'm very happy to welcome Katerina, who is from EIT, Henriette from DG Move, Olivier from DG Grow, Gauthier from DG Education and Culture, Beate from DG REGIO, and Neville from DG RTD. So an excellent group of speakers to take us through this afternoon session. And the setup for this session is that we will have each of our speakers go to the lectern and give a very short, sharp PowerPoint presentation. A few slides to give you some deep insights into what do we mean specifically by synergies and complementarities as this relates to their specific area. We will then all come back together on the panel with some questions, a question session with myself, a little bit more of interaction and some points of clarity. And at the end, we will go out to the audience with some final question and answer session as we did with previous sessions. So just to explain a little bit about the session aims, as we said, it's about explaining the potential synergies and complementarities between the EIT, its innovation communities, and other EU policy and funding instruments. So each speaker is going to talk us through that. In the first instance, we will ask Katerina to tell us from the EIT why it's important that an EIT innovation community is mindful of synergies. We'll then move on to asking Henriette and Olivier to talk a little bit more about the thematic dimension of potential synergies and complementarities, focusing on urban mobility and, of course, added value manufacturing. And then finally, we will talk about the more horizontal level of synergies from an education, regional, and research policy perspective. And Gauthier, Beate and Neville will support us with that. So just before I ask Katerina to go to the lectern, could I please also remind our speakers if we can be very brief to the point. We're looking for 5-minute intervention from each of you. So that's the first challenge of this afternoon. Katerina, can I ask you to take the floor, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. So, earlier today, you heard from my colleagues important information regarding what it takes to be a successful EIT innovation community, key elements. And I think that by now we can all agree that one of the strongest elements of an innovation community is a strong collaborative culture. So this is something that it should be reflected both within the partnership as well as beyond it. And the reasons are more than obvious. First, it's about being smart. It's about identifying strategic partners that you can actually work in a very good way with. Second, it's about joining efforts. It's about being smart in using existing instruments and schemes. And of course, about adding value to your own work that will maximize your impact and allow you to be more efficient. And to do that, you just need to develop gradually an extensive network of collaborating organizations. And you need to do that at national, regional, and international level. And just for the next step, this needs a strategy on synergies, one that can actually contribute to the overall strategy, to the overall strategic objectives of your innovation community. And this is important. You also need a roadmap, one that can take you there. And for the next step, what I would suggest, starting from this phase, it's very, very important. you need to just answer 5 simple questions. This is the who. Identify who are the partners that can actually, who are the key actors that can actually turn into your strategic partners. Identify the what. What kind of activities do you actually want to implement with them? Would it be just some simple raising of awareness, or just joint implementation projects, or even aligning at strategic level? It's the where. What kind of activities, programs, instruments are actually of your mutual benefits? Of course, the when. An innovation community has a long-term strategy. You need to carefully design what kind of synergies would actually contribute to this strategy. And of course, it's the why. What is the added value of such a synergy? Is it worth doing it with someone else, or should you do it on your own? Synergies can take place in different ways, different levels and dimensions. It can take place in a thematic way, in the specific themes of urban mobility and added value manufacturing. It can also take place at horizontal level, either at the 3 different pillars of the EIT's work, which is entrepreneurship, research and innovation, and education and skills. It can also take place in other horizontal areas, such as regional development, excellence, or any other area that you as experts will identify that is important for you to work. It can also take place at the strategy and policy level, as well as at operational level. It's mainly aligning, having a consultative dialogue with the European Commission, whose colleagues are here today, providing feedback, valuable feedback for the policy making, which is important, but also aligning, ensuring that you align early with key EU priorities. It's also important for the operational level. Which are the joint projects that are of your particular interest? So just to give you some examples of how this is already happening, maybe something that can actually inspire you. EIT Energy is one of the 15 key actors currently coordinating the set plan. This is in close coordination with the Director General of Energy of the European Commission. EIT Health has decided, and already did it, they established a strategic advisory board with high-level participation from the European Commission. This is services of the European Commission that are important for their own activities. EIT Digital is coordinating and getting funding from Horizon 2020 for the manufacturing industry digital innovation hubs. And this is coming in partnership with the private-public partnership for factories and other key actors. EIT Climate Kick is working with JRC, the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, both in the level of the Smart Specialization Platform for Energy, as well as with the Lying Regions team. And this happens in the context of the EIT Regional Innovation Scheme. I will not go into more details, but just highlight the last one, having also in mind the challenge that Alison gave us of being very brief. The joint efforts between EIT Community. This is the cross-key collaboration. This was mentioned before during a question. How important is that to happen? Well, this is very, very important for us. And this is already something facilitated and, let's say, incentivized in a way by the EIT. Our director mentioned before the cross-kick activity of the EIT House. This is very important, it's already working. He mentioned other different activities. However, I would encourage you to start identifying joint activities already in your proposal. This is important. So I think that's all for me. Thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you.
Was I brief?
Thank you, Katerina. I think that was an excellent start to set the scene for the rest of our presentations which follow in this session. The big message I took from this was the strategic approach to synergies and also connecting that to the knowledge triangle. And I think going back to what I said at the beginning of the session, that this is about policy and funding, it's not just about connecting with other areas across Commission services, it's also about the innovation communities connecting to each other, which is the point you made at the end, so a well-made point. Thank you very much, and thank you for keeping to time. Can I now ask, please, Henriette from DG Move, if you would take the floor and give us some insights from your side. Thank you very much.
So, good afternoon. My name is Henriette, and I would like to thank you for inviting me. And I would also like to say to you that we have been waiting so long to get to today. I've been stalking all the Martins of the EIT and all the Michaels of the EIAC for the last 5 years to get to today. So I'm really, really pleased that we're going to have the Kick Urban Mobility. I cannot wait until you guys start. I'm really excited about this. This Kick Urban will be the single largest urban innovation program that we have ever done in the European Union. So I'm really thrilled about that. I would love to be working with you, and that is my kind of outreach to you, please. Now, so now the boring bit. Okay, so from a DG Move perspective, what you are going to do in urban mobility is so relevant. We have a number of challenges. About 25% of all CO2 emissions in cities are the result of urban mobility. We're looking at a 40 billion euro investment deficit in infrastructure each year. Okay. The money was talking. We're looking at around 10,000 road deaths in cities each year. And these are big challenges. Congestion costs us 1% of GDP in urban areas. So there are big challenges for urban logistics and for passenger movement in city and urban areas. So, and this is also the challenge to you as a KIC. We need solutions that can help. It can help us with better planning of our cities, that can help us with data in our cities, that can decarbonize the way we deliver and move people around. And you see on this slide the 4 big areas of urban mobility of EU transport policy, and all of these reflect the needs and the solutions that I hope that you will provide to us. Now, as Katerina and many other people said to you, we have already a few things in place. We have in place a number of grants, and also, for example, the Civitas network that helps with disseminating the results of all our projects. We have the urban nodes, which are the basically really the nodes where on our big transport corridor networks. These are important for multimodal freight and multimodal passengers. But if you're in a city that happens to be on a corridor, you have major issues with congestion, major issues with air quality. So what can this KIC urban mobility do to help these cities and to help urban areas? We also have already put in place a number of financial instruments, from lending to grants to technical assistance that help cities to invest in their urban mobility strategies. Secondly, it's also about creating scale. And I'm very happy that we have set up the Innovation Partnership in Smart Cities. I've seen a few people of the EIP around. These are 5 initiatives where cities and industry already come together and say, okay, what can we do and how can we pilot in our city areas? We have founded 2 networks of public procurers, because public procurement for sustainable innovation and mobility is just as important and will be a pool for you as a KIC urban mobility to get your solutions to the market. And finally, we have set up the EIB Elena tool, which will help cities with technical assistance. So there's already a lot in place, and I would like to encourage you to make use of these tools, to make use of these grants and these networks. They will help you a lot. Now, my final slide is where I started with, and I've used the word progressive. And the word progressive means it's open, it's about involving your society, involving your stakeholders, and it's also about forward thinking. And the word came from a group of Americans that came to visit us last year, and they said they loved our progressive urban mobility systems. What I would also like to ask you is to talk about a transport systems approach, where we optimize the whole transport system and not just one single solution, where we look at embracing these technological opportunities. Where we think about what needs to happen in this transition period, where we will have a mix of autonomous, semi-autonomous, connected vehicles. How will this work in our urban areas? And then the overall aim is really to get cities that are more livable, less congestion, better air quality, and create local jobs. Now, I would like also that the KIC Urban Mobility creates the scale and opportunity for market entry. You're there as a network, you're a sizable market and marketing tool. And finally, last year, on the 29th of March, I organized an event to really think about what the KIC Urban Mobility would look like. And one of the key messages was this quote from my director, and it said, "We hope that the KIC Urban Mobility will nurture the future and that it will turn transport from just a job into a career." And really, I hope that all the entrepreneurship and the education that you're going to plan in this KIC Urban Mobility will contribute to that, because 40 to 50% of our transport workers will retire in the coming 10 years. We want to give transport workers a good, very technology skilled jobs for the future. So this is where I would like to leave you. These are big challenges, and I'm sure that the KIC Urban Mobility can deliver on them. Thank you so much.
Henriette, thank you very much for that, for sharing your enthusiasm with us and indeed an insight into the magnitude of the opportunity under the innovation community for urban mobility. Thank you very much. Can we move on now, please, to Olivier? Olivier from DG Grow, to give us some of your insights. Thank you, Olivier.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. So at DG Grow, we have been waiting for our KIC even for longer than maybe DG Move.
It's not a competition.
It's not a competition. So we are very pleased to be here today. So how does it work? So it's important to move from policy to action, and KICs are about taking action. And in this context, I have to underline that the EU has one industrial policy. So it has been communicated by President Juncker on the 30th of September with a communication called a renewed industrial policy strategy. It was made back-to-back with a speech of President Juncker on the State of the Union. The industrialization, the reindustrialization and the reshoring of jobs is one of the 10 priorities of President Juncker. So, of course, the advent of EIT manufacturing has been awaited by the European Commission. At DG Grow, we are supporting SMEs because we are the DG responsible for SMEs, for the definition of SMEs. We have one program for SMEs, COSME, implemented by EASME. And we are in charge of part of Horizon 2020 in raw materials and in space. And we are also supporting startups. This is why the EIT is dear to us. In 2016, in November, we published a communication called Startup and Scale-Up Initiative. The Commission was underlining and still underlining the need for scaling up innovative companies in Europe. DG Grow has been supportive of the EIT ecosystem and is even more supportive today. We have already synergies with the existing KICs. This collaboration is recent, but welcome. With EIT Climate KIC, to add to the list presented by Katerina, we have a project called InnoSpace. It is about boosting innovative entrepreneurship using Earth observation data from space, and notably from the Copernicus program. It's ongoing. With the EIT raw materials, we have had a long collaboration, and we are sharing events and conferences with this EIT. With all KICs, we are planning training sessions on design-driven innovation because we are financing training programs in order to boost design within the innovation community. How could design contribute to innovation? We had together with all KICs a seminar on smart specializations last year in March. We welcomed the opening in Brussels of the EIT House last year. And last but not least, we are thankful to the EIT to be part of our industry days. We started last year with the first edition of the Industry Day. We will have the Industry Day this year on the 22nd and 23rd of this month. You are all welcome, but I think it's all booked. But you can still attend this event through live web streaming if you want. And it's important if you want to compete for EIT manufacturing. And this Industry Day will be opened by President Juncker, as it was the case last year. I think we can still deepen synergies with existing and future KICs. With the EIT manufacturing, priority number one for us will be skills. It's the problem number one in the industry today. Skills are not available in the market to operate modern machines, computer-aided robots. And we need not only PhDs, engineers, but we need as well technicians. And it's important for innovation. It's important for the take-up of innovation. We are expecting this KIC to be part of our platform for industrial modernization. This platform is co-managed between DG GROW, DG REGIO, and the GRC. We expect more collaboration with COSME and the European Entrepreneurship Network. But that being said, we are not all for the EIT manufacturing. We care for EIT urban mobility. It's important as well, and I think we expect a collaboration between this KIC and the GSA. So the GSA is the agency responsible for GNSS and for Galileo program within the EU, and the GSA has funded many innovative projects in order to use Galileo together with GPS applications. And you cannot imagine today solutions for urban mobility without geolocalization, and Galileo should be part of the picture. And there are certainly other areas where we could find synergies with all KICs. We need lessons from people working on the ground with startups and innovative companies. We will be willing to get information from KICs about their regional innovation schemes, because it's an input for our clusters policy, and vice versa. What we do on clusters policy could be good for you. So we should not work in isolation, so we should exchange and cross-fertilize. And it's my plea, my personal plea, I think, even if you are not per se as KIC part of the EU ecosystem, you should be able, nevertheless, to access some Commission IT tools or databases. I'm thinking of the Innovation Radar. The Innovation Radar is an interface whereby you can select easily all innovation funded by Horizon 2020 and tomorrow by FP9. And we have had contacts with KIC Digital, so EIT Digital on the Innovation Radar. But as this tool will be implemented on all FP9, and as the EIT will be more certainly and hopefully part of FP9, I think this tool could cover all activities of a KIC in the future. And the other instrument is called TEAM. Sorry, I don't remember. It's Technology and Innovation Monitor. It's data mining tool developed by the GRC, digging into all the scientific literature and all the patent databases. So if you want to search millions of documents on your area, this is a very useful instrument. And today it's only accessible to, I would say, Commission services. And last but not least, I think all KICs should be invited in events, conferences organized by the Commission or by DG GROW. And of course, we hope that at the next Industry Day next year, we will have on board the newly born EIT manufacturing.
Olivier, 1 minute.
1 minute. Done. Voilà.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you very much, Olivier. Very comprehensive. The links to industrial policy, significant industry-wide opportunity, startup scale-up initiative, and of course links to smart specialisation platforms, which we'll hear a little bit more about from Beate later. So I'm now going to turn to the other side over here, and I would like to ask Gauthier, could you please take the podium, Gauthier, and give us an overview from the perspective of education and culture. Thank you, Gauthier.
So good afternoon. I will go straight to the boring bits. So I will first present you quickly the Commission priority on education, and I will explain what the Commission is doing and then what the Commission is doing with the EIT and innovation communities. And I will focus specifically on education for innovation, not on the entire portfolio of education, because this education for innovation is really at the core of the EIT activities in the in the integration of the knowledge triangle. And indeed, this so lately this human factor aspect of the innovation process has been more and more emphasized. And so beyond going only, beyond talking about the technological transfer or the funding of innovation, really the investment in human capital has been really emphasized lately. And as a matter of fact, one of the biggest strengths of the EU is this human capital. So we have very good graduates who have excellent researchers, and we should be able to capitalize much more on what they are doing and make benefit from it. I'm not saying that we don't do it, but I'm just saying that we should do it much more and much more efficiently. So how do we do it? So now there's a widespread agreement that the changing nature of the society and of the economy means that graduates, and not only graduates, but workers in general, they need some different type of skills. I'm not saying that the very technical thematic skills are not needed anymore. On the contrary, we'll still need some very high-level technical skills, but these high-level technical skills have a lifespan, a life expectancy that is reducing. And the initial training you get at university is getting less and less relevant after a few years. So we really need to retrain, we really need to reskill these populations. So this is aiming at graduates, but also after graduation at professionals. So lifelong learning is very, very important. And so this has a lot of implication on what we learn, on how we learn, and also on when we learn. So technical skills is very important, but also transversal skills or entrepreneurial skills. So the aim is really to get these T-shaped graduates. So graduate with a very strong vertical technical skills and very strong horizontal and transversal thematic skills, because people will change jobs. They will have a career that is less linear than what it was before. And because jobs will disappear, other jobs will appear. So they really need to have technical skills to retrain these technical skills, and also to have skills, horizontal skills that will accompany them throughout their life. And so they will really have to basically to learn how to learn faster and more efficiently. So for these new skills really need to have an education system that is fit for purpose. So, and we need to make our universities more entrepreneurial, more innovative. For that, I mean, to avoid the skills mismatch, we need really to have the business sector involved in education, not really in the design of the curricula, but also in the implementation of the curricula. So this is crucial, this is very important. And also, I'm talking about university, but I should also talk about education system in general, because if you really want to change the mindset, if you really want to develop a risk-taking culture, you really need to start very early. So you need to start at school level. So school level, higher education, and professional. So the entire lifelong learning. And finally, we need also to modernize methods of teaching and learning, meaning that and more the teaching should be tailor-made with e-learning, blended learning, etc., etc. So what we do at the Commission? At the Commission, we don't have any regulatory or binding power, which means that we really need to work closely with the member states to identify and promote best practices. We do that through a lot of workshops, a lot of working groups with education specialists, with education experts, with ministries to really identify and try to scale up best practices. And we communicate this through various commission communications. Two of the last ones are the renewed agenda for higher education and the digital education action plan that I will maybe talk a bit later. But we also fund some initiatives, we support initiatives with funding, mostly through Erasmus+, but also through the EIT and the KICS, because they are funded through H2020, so to commission funding. And more specifically on entrepreneurship education, I want to really highlight 2 or 3 key actions that we're doing, mostly on the knowledge alliances, which are calls for supporting the development of innovative curricula, work-based learning with the engagement of business and different type of stakeholders. And also the EIT Innovate, which could be very interesting for all higher education institutions, because it's a self-assessment tool that we have developed with the OECD to really help higher education to assess and develop their entrepreneurial potential. And quickly on innovation in education, also we are very active on the promotion of technology use and digital competence development in education. And Selfie, I want really to talk about Selfie, which is a self-assessment tool that we've developed with the GRC to help schools assess their education, their digital readiness on education. So what we do with the KICS. So first you should know that in the GIAC, we are responsible for education, but also we are the parent DG of the EIT, so we are also supervising the EIT, which means that from the very beginning, we've been involved a lot with the EIT, and we worked a lot with the EIT, and a lot of the Commission priorities on education have been channeled through the EIT and through the innovation communities. For example, on the modernization of higher education, the development of digital skills, the mobility aspects, the link with the business, the focus on entrepreneurship. Also, more recently, the incentive on developing lifelong learning. And this has been formalized through the development of the EIT label, that is one of the really flagship of education of the EIT, which actually includes most of the policy priorities we have at the Commission. We work a lot with the EIT and the innovation communities on sharing best practices, which means that the innovation communities, education specialists, are invited and participate in most of our working group on our workshops to really identify and to showcase what the KICS are doing, because what the innovation communities are doing in terms of education is really, really advanced, and it's good for them to share with other stakeholders what they're doing, but also to see what the others are doing. And there's a lot of co-creation in this. And also, finally, a concrete collaboration we have with the EIT lately on the Digital Education Action Plan and the Copernicus program. So the Digital Education Action Plan has been released recently, and it's really to promote the technological use and the development of digital competence in education. And out of the 11 concrete actions that the Commission is pushing forward in this Digital Education Action Plan, 4 come from the EIT community. So we're really proud of them, and we're really looking forward to work with them on this. And the last one, actually, my colleague Olivier talked about the collaboration with the Copernicus program on space, so I will not talk about it. So basically, this is the kind of education activities that the EIT and the current innovation communities are doing with us on education, and this is what we expect the new innovation communities to embark on, and we're looking forward to this. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Gauthier. A huge range of initiatives you covered. Just a quick glimpse of some of those things. I think you painted a vision for the innovation communities to contribute to the wider education and skills agenda. You talked about education for innovation. You talked about boosting EU strengths, already existing EU strengths in the human capital sphere, and of course the importance of technical and transversal skills from a lifelong learning perspective. Huge issues for innovation communities to of course be considering. So thank you very much for that. And with that, Beate, could I ask you please to take the floor from a REGIO perspective and give us some of your insights. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much for inviting DG REGIO to this event today. And as I see the further advanced session, the more difficult to say something more about the synergies. So many important things has been already said by my colleagues, but I hope that I have still some new information for you. So please let me start. We have already heard said by Alison as well that synergies are not only about funding, but about aligning strategies, policies, and so on. But nevertheless, funding is very important, and the funding instruments. So, what is the ESIF support for research and innovation? There are in all 458 billion euro ESIF funding in total for research, but for different things like research and innovation, digital technologies, supporting the low carbon economy, environment, and SMEs. But we don't have to forget that the objective of the ESIF funding is aims at socio-economic development, at reducing disparities in the regions, and it aims on structural adjustment and industrial conversion. This we have to bear in mind. And excuse me, I hope that I don't lose my voice. I hope you hear me well. However, don't be surprised. In total, there are even more ESIF funds available when we take the national contributions. There are over 643 billion euro for this programming period 2014-2020. And of course, it is important for you to know how to get to this money. Here, please have an attentive look on this pie graph. This is the overview share of ESIF allocations with the national contributions. And yes, this is here. The biggest piece is going 15% to competitiveness of SMEs. 15% of this total funding is about 95 billion euro. So you can imagine, and SMEs, not at least manufacturing, of course, as well. Here, research and innovation and low carbon, what is important for example, IT, KIC, urban mobility, each 10%, what makes out about 65 billion euro each. How to get there? This is the question. The best, if not the only, but at least the most synergetic and complementary way is to go along the smart specialization strategies in the regions and in its investment priorities. The local and regional dimension of the IT KICs offers a fruitful space for defining common actions within the knowledge triangle with the regions to strengthen the innovation landscape in the regions and member states. And this would help to build the local innovation ecosystems, since the smart specialization represents a new way of working together for economic transformation and modernization. So, as we see here, regions identified within the smart specialization priority areas for ESIF investment in research and development and innovation. And they are risk-free priorities like agro-food and related, cats, health, energy, and so on. You see on the side here how, excuse me, here, the percentage, but don't take this for absolute numbers, because it's a living process, so to say. So here are identified 1,260 priorities, but now they are already, I think, 1,400. So it changed, because the specializations are being still developed, redefined a little bit, and so on and so forth. The investment priorities are added, but please have a look on the site of S3 platform, JRC, where you will find the possibility to see in which region, in which program, which investment priorities are important for. This knowledge is very important for you to make strategic choices and take decisions for the future. So, there are also a number of programs, instruments, initiatives that support the implementation of the cohesion policy and the smart specialization strategies in the regions. Like, for example, thematic smart specialization platforms, we have already heard, said by Olivier, could be important for EIT KIC manufacturing, the industrial modernization platform, but I think, for example, for thematic smart specialization platform for energy could be as well important for urban mobility KIC. So, and how to find the contact points in the regions. And I mean the contact points to ESIF managing authorities, especially to ERDF managing authorities. I am sure that most of you know already, just in the lunchtime I had a small talk and asked a colleague from Slovakia, and he told me, yes, of course, he had already contacts with ERDF in the region, managing authorities. But if you don't know, so please go to the site of DG REGIO. You'll find this here, regional policy, and you will find on the InfoRegio map the possibility to look for regions, programs, priorities, to click on this region, on the program, and so on, and it will give you a link to managing authorities. You can go, of course, and look for beneficiaries who is already getting funding. So in these constructions, you can map your needs and the offer. So I think this is the very important step for concrete actions. But let me say at the end, beware about that not DG REGIO distribute the ERDF money, but yes, the managing authorities in the regions and member states. So, thank you very much.
Beate, thank you very much. There was a lot of information again there to take in for everyone, and thankfully we will have access to the PowerPoint presentations after today on the website. Beate focused on funding instruments in particular and investment leverage. She talked a lot about the smart specialisation approach, smart specialisation strategies, which has come up quite a lot from the speakers this afternoon, and the scaling up opportunity which this allows to build, and the fact that it's still a rather fluid agenda, which is of course a fantastic opportunity for our innovation communities. So with that, Neville, I invite you to, from RTD to give us some thoughts from your side. Neville, thank you.
Thank you very much. Alison, is the level about right? I tend to shout anyway, so I will speak at this point in a rather monotonous way so they can adjust the volume up or down. Look, I think it's the curse or it's the delight of the person that comes last to be quick, and I won't disappoint you in that regard. I guess I've got some very simple messages about Horizon 2020. I guess perhaps the most powerful one is that the opportunities for synergies, complementarity are everywhere. It is the very nature of Horizon 2020 that it's a shift from the way in which past framework programs were organized. So the emphasis is on the bottom up, on the creativity of the organizations, the firms, the universities, the RTOs, the communities, to define what they believe is the right, is the nature of the research to be carried out in order to deliver against the objectives which we set. And of course, Horizon 2020 was designed from the bottom up with the EIT as part of it. Now, the other message I have is that in order to be successful, I think you really do have to understand a lot, or quite a lot anyway, about what it is we try and achieve with the program and reflect that in the sorts of proposals that you put forward. And I'm just going to spend a moment picking up on a couple of those points, if I may. Oh, no. Oh, no.
Other way.
So, perhaps the biggest message of all is that we have half the program to go, just a little under half the program to go, and we have 30 billion euros of funding to spend. We launched the final work program of Horizon 2020 on October the 28th last year, a major political event. It covers the last 3 years of the program, and we spent a lot of time trying to understand how to organize things better, how to sharpen the messages, how to align better with the political priorities. And you see that reflected right the way through the program. This point about impact is critical. We really do need to understand how to deliver the impacts which we've identified in the program. If you're familiar with Horizon 2020, you'll see in the calls and the topics, for example, there is an expected impact statement, setting out where we expect this research to go in the future. And as an applicant to the program, it's critically important to understand that and to reflect it in your proposal. We also have, I guess many of you, probably all of you will know, the opportunity with the final work programme to pilot new initiatives, and perhaps one of the most important of those, of course, is the pilot on the European Innovation Council, an attempt to look at scaling up issues, addressing radical breakthrough research and innovation to focus on small firms. We see how the lessons of that go, and of course we're thinking very hard about the next framework programme, which is something I'll come to in a moment. I mentioned the priorities, and if you pick up I guess probably no one reads the general introduction to Horizon 2020. Each work programme has a general introduction, and I regard that as a bit sad because I actually write that bit. But what I would say is 30 pages, and probably about 15 of those are the front part. The second part is about focus areas. Read it, actually read it, and you will get an absolutely comprehensive vision or statement about what this programme is about, and you'll see those political priorities picked up there. So, for example, sustainable development, digitization, international cooperation, all of these things we looked at very hard to understand how we could deliver those more effectively in these final 3 years. And we encapsulated them in what we call as focus areas. Focus areas are simply the means by which we try and bring things together to support critical mass, to support the advantages you get from scale and scope, to really engage across the boundaries of different research areas. And you see these picked up in these areas: climate, boosting the circular economy, digitization and transformation, supporting the security union, and also this one I've mentioned a moment ago, the pilot on the European Innovation Council. And here you have it, these 4 focus areas, and each of them represents more than €1 billion of funding over this 3-year period of the final work programme. We also have these other cross-cutting issues which are extremely important: migration, batteries, blue growth. All of these things you will see reflected in the different calls and topics of the programme. We have a fantastic search tool in Horizon 2020, which means even if you don't necessarily see what it is you're looking for, you type in the areas which you're interested in, and the tool itself will actually identify the potential opportunities for you. Now, I want to conclude with just a few words on the work we're doing on the next framework programme, because I think it helps you understand where we're heading and also help you perhaps frame the sort of research questions you're developing. So we are, of course, looking to develop a new framework programme. This will begin, hopefully, at the conclusion of Horizon 2020, and we've engaged a range of different areas of work to try and support our thinking on that. The interim evaluation, which took place last year, was a key step in that process, and that identified, for example, the need to be more strategic, more integrated. You know, these are common lessons. Perhaps break up the activities into fewer silos, into fewer categories, and our focus area work, which I've mentioned a moment ago, is an extremely important part of that. The idea of missions is something which we're looking at very hard. How can you encapsulate the flexibility, the ambition, the whole engagement which comes from a very clear mission? We had a high-level group of experts led by Pascal Lamy, also looking at the future of European research funding, and there were a whole series of points coming out of that, including, for example, again, this question of missions, the need to focus on impacts, the need to simplify the European landscape, the importance of synergies, we've heard that from several speakers here, the necessity of engaging with citizens in the way in which you develop your priorities for a programme, and the importance of international dimension in terms of research and innovation. We did some work on foresight. We were looking at some of the issues coming out of that, for example, the critical need to take a systemic view to developing understanding of problems, the need for openness, again, this question of citizens' engagement. So that's my message, or those are my messages. We have 30 billion euros of funding. We have a clear set of priorities. If you read the general introduction, you'll see those set out. Understand this question of focus areas, and we're now looking at all the sorts of lessons which we've managed to bring together in terms of developing our thinking for a new framework programme. Thank you.
Thank you, Neville. Neville. Thank you, Neville. And I suppose to recap a couple of things which you pointed to, the bottom-up orientation which is required to engage with the Horizon 2020 programme, the important role of the European Innovation Council, and of course the Horizon 2020 work programmes and the cross-cutting topics which you mentioned, I think are incredibly important for our innovation communities to be picking up on. I'm conscious of time, so what I would like to do now is very briefly go back out to our speakers with a question that maybe to elaborate a little bit more, but I will ask, please, for a very short, succinct response, because I do want to go out to the audience. I want to ensure that the people who've come here today have another opportunity to ask questions before we leave, and we have half an hour left. So very short, sharp responses. Olivier, I'd like to start with you, if you don't mind. You mentioned the EIT and raw materials and the collaboration with GROW, but we didn't get an awful lot of detail in that because there wasn't the opportunity to do it. Could you give me in a nutshell, what was that?
So far I know, and it was mentioned by Katerina, so we have raw materials university days co-managed, co-organized between our unit in charge of raw materials and EIT raw materials. There is a clear, I would say, scope for collaboration with this kick. It's less obvious for other kicks. That's in a nutshell. So, first reasons for collaborating with, I would say, policy DGs is first for you, if you win this competition. First reason is cross-fertilization. The second reason is visibility for you, because you will be invited to events organized by the European Commission. And third, it's still important, money. As it was announced this morning, you are limited to 25% funding from the EIT, but any money coming from the Commission comes ahead, top on this 25% and comes within the pot of 25% of other funding. So, and this is why, if there is a common interest, we can find an agreement, an ad hoc agreement, and to work together.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Katerina, I'd like to go to you because you talked about a roadmap to plan and to map out the synergies, and there's evidently a lot of work that could involve. What are the benefits of creating that roadmap? Why do it? Why not just do it as you work as you go?
Well, you need to know where you want to go. So you need to find the ways and you need to have a clear path of how you can get there. So the strategy can actually identify which are the strategic objectives, what do you actually want to achieve, then you need to have the means. So let me bring just a very good example. I think that during the day my colleagues mentioned that the new kicks actually use the lessons learned from the previous kicks. So this is the case for EIT Food, for example. And the new upcoming kicks will actually be even more benefited from these lessons learned. So EIT Food, during the proposal stage, they did an excellent mapping of key stakeholders, priority stakeholders for the synergies part. So it was just a very clear table on the kind of activities at national, international, and European level. And then they translated it during the startup phase. So they were designated in 2016, and they already started working and approaching these key stakeholders, the important one, let's say, even in 2016 during the startup phase. And they succeeded, for example, to align and already got selected to implement the project, coordinated project, on the EU Food 2030, which is one of the key priorities for the food sector. And they're working with DG EAC already, they're working with DG RTD already.
Okay.
So you need that.
Okay, so the strategic orientation helps for the longer run. Okay, that's very helpful. Beate, if I could just turn to you. You mentioned a couple of things, in particular, like the Interreg Europe programme in regional policy and the Stairway to Excellence initiative. How can an innovation community connect to this type of programme? How do they do it?
These are two examples of different kind of initiatives and programs. So, for example, Stairway to Excellence, it aims at closing innovation gap between European regions, because still there is a big gap. And with synergetic actions, upstream synergies built through, for example, ESIF support with possibilities for construct research infrastructure. And then to make an excellence research there and benefit from this research again in putting something in the way of global value chains for creating benefits in the regions. This is the objective of the ideal objective of Stairway to Excellence. And how to connect to this? For example, Stairway to Excellence was conceived at first for the 13 new member states. Now it has been extended to all member states, but especially, of course, to the regions lagging behind there. And when you look at the methodic, this is, as I already have explained, to have a look on the smart specialization investment priorities in the region. Have a look whether already the region took part in this Stairway to Excellence actions, because this initiative has been started already 2015, and now there is a third phase of this, more hand-on even, how to do it. The system of trainings is being developed, how to produce the synergies. This is one way. For example, Interreg Europe.
Okay, very briefly. Yeah, very briefly.
Sorry?
If you could be very brief now.
Oh, yeah,
so I
okay,
can move
sorry.
on. Thank you.
And Interreg Europe is a fantastic learning platform, and the possibility to find cooperation, partners, and so on. But as well, for me, the methodic is always the same. To map, like Katerina has already said, to see what I need and what I want to get at the end. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we're coming back to the kind of a mapping approach, having a strategic orientation, taking something of a systematic approach to getting it right. So you've really done your research on it. Thank you very much for that. Gauthier, are there any examples you could use to illustrate about connecting Erasmus Plus with innovation communities?
So I mentioned in my presentation the last communication that the Commission has published on digital competences or digital skills. So this action plan, I think it's been adopted a month ago or so, or less than that. And in this action plan, if my memory serves, so the EIT community is involved, is actually leading 4 out of the 11 actions. So what happens is that the Commission has a policy priority on digital skills that is not technically or thematically oriented, because digital skill is actually everywhere. So now it's a very horizontal policy priority, and commit to put some money on the table to go forward and decide on 11 actions, and 4 of them are led by the EIT. So one is on the, I think it's cyber security. So this one is quite interesting, on multipliers, so training the trainers on cyber security. So that's quite interesting. Something on using artificial intelligence to do some data mining for skills needs. So you're gonna do some data mining of the vacations that are posted online, and then you will see really what the skills needs. So that's quite interesting too. There's something on developing skills, so digital and digital skills and entrepreneurship skills for young girls. And there's one more on, I think it's a sort of hackathon that will help to really identify, sort of very bottom-up approach to identify the needs in terms of education, what we should look at.
Great. That's good. These are excellent examples of exactly where to orient and where to look at. Henriette, if I could ask you very briefly, you mentioned entry, scale, and EU cities as living labs. How could an innovation community on urban mobility select areas of synergy? How could they go about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that question. I think, so I'm now talking under the, I see all my EIT colleagues watching, so I will not prescribe what you should be doing, not allowed to do that, but with our engineering logic, you can think about what you can do with your city partners. And we've had a lot of experience with city labs. And I think there are 3 good reasons why a KIC in urban mobility could work with cities. I think the first one is that a KIC urban mobility is about a long-term commitment, and a commitment that is longer than your local elections, than your local mayor. So you need to have a long-term commitment, because also, secondly, it's about transforming your city, and that means testing multiple interventions. So a KIC urban mobility connects stakeholders, and these multiple interventions are very important to test your transport system. Mm-hmm. And I think thirdly, it's about replication. And we have some tools available in replication called Civitas and the Innovation Partnership and our lighthouses. So I would like synergies with what is happening in the labs and with all these replication tools. And may I have 10 more seconds?
10.
About policy.
Okay, 10 only.
Policy involvement. So we as DG Move, we would love to be involved in what you're going to do in the Urban Mobility KIC. We'd love to hear about progress. This is such a fast-moving area that we constantly need to be updated about what is possible, and that we can have a progressive regulation and standardization in Europe. It's for all of us. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And Neville, if I could turn to you. You gave us a very, very comprehensive overview, but is there anything else you would like to add around commonalities in how innovation communities can link to Horizon 2020 opportunities? What are the kind of, what to do, how to go about it?
How to go about it? Communities, well, I think it starts with familiarity of what the funding opportunities are and familiarity with the priorities which I've set out. I think it's inevitable that those who have previous experience of working with programs such as Horizon 2020 have an advantage, or at least the opportunity, put it that way, to share that experience, because there is a great deal of learning about the best way to structure your proposal, develop your ideas. Of course, we have a full range of support structures which are designed exactly to overcome those sorts of difficulties about how you develop your application, and that's a vital thing to be involved with. I think that it's certainly not true, as perhaps people always believed in the past, that partnerships have to have a north and a south and an east and a west and all this sort of stuff. That really isn't the case. Mm-hmm. It's about excellence. It's about having a balanced portfolio of different actors involved. And I think that's essential if you're putting forward a proposal, a collaboration to something like Horizon 2020, to understand the respective roles and the respective competencies in that team. Of course, it may be a perfectly valid criterion for you to think about in terms of, the expertise in different parts of Europe. Maybe, for example, if you're looking at migration flows or something of that sort, bringing together teams with different contexts, that would itself be a vital part in terms of the understanding. So there would be, in that sense, the need to think about the background and the setup of that team. But geography in itself isn't important in that.
Okay, okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. I think the main point I think that we want to pick up on that is the excellence agenda and coming back to the unique eco-innovation system that we've been talking about all day underpinning the innovation communities. I think this is a key point.
It's the entry point. It's the first point. It's above all else. It's the excellence of the proposal that's put forward, and there is no substitute for that. I mean, and it's a difficult concept in some areas. You know what is excellent, but of course, you know there are a lot of safeguards. There are a lot of mechanisms which we have for the evaluation system, which are designed to overcome that. You'll be familiar with the fact that in the case of the European Innovation Council pilot, there is a strengthening of the system through face-to-face interviews at the second stage of the SME action. And that's an important element to understand in terms of how you would approach getting funding. You know, are you prepared to put forward your arguments in that face-to-face fashion, which is a substantial difference from how the remains or the rest of Horizon 2020 works, apart from, of course, the European Research Council, where they also have that face-to-face element.
Okay, thank you. This has been, I think, an excellent session so far in really bringing out some examples and insights which really help us to understand better the opportunities behind synergies and complementarities. What I would like to do, we have some time left, is to go out to the audience now to check are there any points of clarity, any final questions, bearing in mind, of course, that the whole question section in the website remains open, so this is not your final chance to ask questions. But if there is anything that you think requires some further clarity, now is your opportunity. Okay, I have one hand. Do I have one hand only? Sorry, the light is bad. I can't see. Over here. So we have one here and one here. Is that right? I can't see so well. Can we take a question here? Thank you.
Hello, my name is Eduardo Beltrán from Mondragon. Is one question, are you thinking about, in some DGs, thinking about in launching jointly calls with the KICs, the existing EIT, so that is joining forces in terms of budget, for example, from DG Research with EIT or something, just in order to, we have been hearing about cooperation in terms of events, in terms of activities, in terms of policies. Some cooperations are you foreseeing in terms of jointly calls?
So the idea of joint calls, is that foreseen? Yes. Anyone?
Can I add?
Yes, please.
Okay. So as regards to joint calls in terms of KICs, this is very clear. EIT has specific themes. It's in the strategic innovation agenda. So for key calls, this is up to the EIT. As regards to joint activities, this is something that, first of all, at EIT level, we try to do. So we first need to align and have our own synergies approach at EIT level, at institutional level with the colleagues from the Commission, and then goes with the EIT Innovation Community. So, for example, in collaboration with DG EAC and DG GROW, there was a joint call for Copernicus. This was one of the examples that I mentioned. And EIT Climate KIC, EIT Raw Materials participated. So they're implementing currently activities. So there were joint calls. This is happening in different levels, but this is happening in the joint coordination of the EIT and the innovation communities with either 1, 2, or 3 different Commission services.
Okay, thank you. There was a question over here.
Thank you.
Somewhere.
Agnes Karlaftis, Epafos Advisors. We represent here the EcoWaves movement, the pan-European and Mediterranean movement, which is based in direct democracy, in science and in ecology. The question is that we in the Union, we are thinking, especially on the innovation field, very theoretically, like the ancient Greeks have spoken about Thales the Milesian, which Thales, the company, the space company has his name, that the philosophers are very theoretical and they don't implement. They cannot practice. Thales responded, and actually he proved that they were wrong. I hope that we can do the same thing, because in the morning I'm using the bicycle, and here in Brussels, which is the center of the innovation, which is the capital, let's say, in a way, of Europe, we don't have roads, streets, rules for the bicycles. I'm shouting 10 years to the European cyclists, to the Belgian cyclists, that we have to invest on the streets of the cycle, because this goes to the urban mobility, plus it will help the manufacturing in a lot of ways by using innovative ideas about the panels of the streets, which they are using in Holland, in France, and they are getting energy from the pedestrians and the cycles as they are moving on special streets. This is very dangerous, and if we want to be pragmatic and to work for the citizens, we have to build first the infrastructure in innovation. Thank you.
Thank you. So the citizen orientation, a real bottom-up drive. Do we have, I think the urban mobility particularly was mentioned there. Any strong, any kind of response?
I think this is a really relevant point that the gentleman makes. We are constantly, as our EU transport policy is about the model shift, shifting away from car use to more active modes, cycling, walking. And last year we launched the European cycling cycling policy. There will be a big conference under the Austrian presidency to shape and to look for priorities for implementing European cycling policy. And indeed, there's a lot of innovation happening to make cycling safer, connected, and also under the freight, cycling and freight, just for your last mile, very important. So thank you so much for bringing that up.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Just before we finish for the day.
One more question there.
Sorry, there's one more. Sorry, apologies, it's very difficult to see from here. This will be the last question of the afternoon. Can you keep it very brief, please? Thank you.
In the urban mobility, a great portion of the solutions will be procured by governmental bodies like local governments, central governments, etc. Now, the innovative procurement legislation, I don't think that is good enough at the moment to facilitate the procurement of a large portion of what's going to be invented in this new kick. Are you planning to tackle that problem?
We're going to fight about this, Olivier and me.
Okay, can we keep it very, very brief? It's a big question about innovative procurement legislation and how this needs to move to support the huge ambitions behind what we have in our innovation communities. We could probably spend another 2 hours discussing that, but we're not going to. So very, very briefly.
Thank you for this question. So DigiGrow is working on public procurement of innovation. So DigiGrow is in charge of public procurement directives for the EU, and it's possible for public tenderers to leave some space for innovations within public procurement. So we have published guidelines for public tenderers, municipalities, regions. And of course, public procurement is 20% of GDP in Europe. It's key for the uptake of innovations, and public tenderers should think in terms of performance and not in terms of solutions. And it's up to the market, to innovative startups to make proposals. And that being said, it should lead also to experimentation. So we have to experiment things at local stages, at local scales.
Okay, thank you. Henriette.
Yeah, so I really appreciate that question. We have the directives, we have the guidelines, and what I missed myself in procuring was the know-how, just how to do it. So that is why we've set up these 2 networks of public procurers. One is called BIZET, the other one is SPICE, and these are around 15 cities where the procurement departments of these cities have come together, and they are actually showing test cases about, for example, how do you procure zero-emission maintenance equipment for your streets, so street sweepers. It's a big issue. They are not on the market yet, or they're too expensive. So how do you procure those? How do you set up your technical specifications? And the journey of these two public procurement networks is amazing. They first started with the question about what do we buy in our city? As how many buses do we buy each year? How many food delivery trucks do we buy each year? And that has really brought out and articulated the need for procurement. And also it has set a path about going into connected and low emission procurement. So I'm really excited about it, and it's a big, important question. Thank you so much.
Yes, indeed, and certainly a watch this space question for everyone, I suppose. Before we finish, I have a few words I'd like to say, but before I do that, I would like to ask Katerina, are there any sort of parting comments you'd like to leave us with based on the reflections we've had from our colleagues?
Well, I think we have a very nice, excellent panel here. Colleagues presented the key EUPOL's priorities in 5 very important Directorate Generals of the Commission. However, this is not the only part of Synergies you need to work. You should use a bottom-up approach. You should see what else is there for you. We said before, national, international level, European level, it's also the Commission services, it's other EU multipliers. It's up to you, you are the experts, you need to see where you want to go and how you want to do that. And just as a final note to add that EIT will be there to support you, and we will be there to support you and facilitate your relations wherever you want to go. So please have this in mind too.
Okay, excellent, thank you. I think that's an excellent way for us to conclude today. The bottom-up orientation must prevail. The innovation, the ideas have to come from you. They can't be driven from the supply side. They have to be driven from your side. So I think that really probably concludes our various presentations, overviews and sessions today. It only remains for me to say a huge thank you to both our speakers on the stage with us now, and of course the speakers we had throughout the day. A great deal of work has gone into the preparation of today's Information Day from our EIT colleagues, so a very warm thank you to all of you. A warm thank you to all of you for staying with us over the course of the day today, and indeed to those who've been web streaming. As we've said, there is more still to come in terms of keeping an eye on what's happening through the website, through these kinds of updates, the presentations that we've had today, the questions today, and indeed there will be more questions, will continue to be updated on the website. So don't forget to, obviously, to continue to look out for that. And I suppose a final reminder on proposal submission by the 12th of July, that's the day when it closes. The selection of the EIT's 2 new innovation communities, EIT Manufacturing and EIT Urban Mobility, will be in December. Okay, so we know those timescales, we can't reiterate them enough. So I think it only remains for me to say thank you very much to all of you. Very, very best of luck with your next steps and a safe onward journey after today. Thank you very much.